Alright, it's time to talk about another video. And this one ought to be interesting. Yeah, I'm talking about one of, if not the most controversial characters in all of JoJo, Stroheim. Oh boy. I really hope this comment section isn't going to be too bad. But screw it. Let's do it. Today we ask, what if Stroheim didn't die in World War II? Oh boy, this video is gonna be a tough one, isn't it? Okay, I know this is a request because, crazy, lazy old me doesn't do requests, now has to do all the request, but this is one of the ones that's kind of scares me to do because I know that there are a certain minority amount of people who are offended with Stroheim's character and his occupation, which I'm not going to go through, but let's just say he was a soldier in the 1930s and 40s who helped a certain organization out. Okay, before I just get things any more worse, let's just skip to the video because I'm not really doing a good job at explaining this. Alright, what if Stroheim lived? Let's talk about it now. But first, let's thank the person who requested this what if. Thank you, Pesky for requesting this what if. I think it's Pesky I don't know, I probably screwed it up, but I assume it's Pesky So thanks, Pesky for requesting this one. Just so we're clear, I blame you if I get canceled for this video. So let's start off on JoJo Part 2, which... So obviously all of Part 2 goes the same because Stroheim really doesn't die there, even though, let's just be honest, he should have just died against cars if he was going to die like 5 years later off screen. Like, it would have been a far better death if I'm being honest, but besides the point, Stroheim actually will live through World War II. As for how he does, now I don't have that lame excuse as I do in the Mario What If or in the Will What If, where you have Caesar who's helping. Now, since Caesar's unfortunately still gonna die against Walmu for the sake of this plot, so F in the chat for him. Stroheim has to find a new way to live because there's really no other way. Maybe you can bring Caesar's brothers into the war, like how I said in my other one, so maybe they get involved and they can help Stroheim. Whether they live or die, that's up to you, but I don't know. Well, I assume they die, just for the sake of plot, since we're never going to see them again, since they played a big role of Stroheim living in those what-ifs. So, like, for the sake of plot, let's say they get involved in the war, even though we don't know their exact fate, and let's assume they just die in the war, so Stroheim can live. Or you can just find another way. I honestly don't know. Maybe he goes to Argentina. Maybe he just forfeits his rights and becomes a prisoner. I'm gonna go with the assumption that he becomes a prisoner, because that would then mean Germany wins the war, and that as a whole of JoJo would be odd to talk about. But that would probably be another video for maybe someone else to talk about, because I generally don't think I'm willing to give that idea justice. But yeah, so Stroheim lives past World War II. How would it affect parts 3 and onwards? So we're going to start off with Stardust Crusaders, where, for the sake of the plot, Stroheim will eventually be out of jail, sometime in like the late 50s or early 60s, because like Speedwagon Foundation probably just get him out. But he's in there for a while, so for the sake of the plot, I assume he might have changed his ways. He's still probably patriotic about Germany, but let's hope he's not that. But yeah, maybe he still has Dominic and Nico, his OCs, which is interesting when you think about it, because all my videos that include them so far have included Julius and Rose. Now, since Caesar dies, there'd be no Julius and Rose, so it's just Dominic and Nico. So that does seem that would make some of the stuff kind of interesting in the story. So, with that being said, Caesar also is out of the story because, he still dies. So that would mean Rose and Julius won't exist. So it's just Dominic, Nico, and Stroheim. So those are the only two OCs, Dominic and Nico. As for how they can affect the plot, I'd probably just have all three of them join around the same time as Joseph. Like, for the sake of plot, I think they'll be there since the beginning. So they're there with Joseph and Avdol, and later on Holly. So they still meet Jotaro, and they also would later meet Kakyoin and Polnareff and Iggy. So it's going to be interesting to see what Polnareff thinks of Stroheim, because, France and Germany were pretty much rivals in World War II. Oh my gosh, this video is gonna... This is probably the most controversial video. You see, maybe I should have some standards and just kind of think of them. No offense to the guy who requested the video, but I don't really know if I'm the guy to give this one justice. But anyway, Stroheim probably... It's going to take a while for Polnareff and Stroheim to get along. For the sake of the plot, I assume Stroheim's changed his ways, so he's not a bad person anymore. Because you really can't have that on the Stardust Crusaders, and plus it'd feel very odd because Polnareff's in the part. But with Dominic and Nico around, they're still there. I really don't think much would change. Maybe Whole Horse actually does join, assuming he falls in love with Nico, but I probably don't see it happening. But for Stardust Crusaders, I personally don't see too much changing. I still think Avdol's going to be the one who gets injured, and I do believe Kakyoin still gets his injury, but I think instead I could see Stroheim and his children playing roles in the story, similar to how the other Crusaders did, maybe add them in some of the fights, in my opinion. But as for some arcs, first arc we're going to talk about is Vanilla Ice for the sake of the plot. So, in my opinion, Younger Darby and Vanilla Ice, I'm just going to skip to the ending. I'm not going to go through all the beginning half. I'll tell you if you're interested in the comments. But, if you're interested to know how the enemy stand fights work, I'll tell you in the comments. But I'm just going to work on the final half of the story. So, aka, basically the Younger Darby, Vanilla Ice, and Dio fights. So, Younger Darby, I'd probably just put Dominic and Nico in the gaming dungeon. So, Jotaro, Kakyoin, and Joseph, they're still there. Kakyoin, unfortunately, still has to job out, so Jotaro still has to get the W. Even though I'd probably just have Dominic or Nico, probably Dominic be the one who takes the L in Kakyoin's place, so Kakyoin doesn't get brought back just to be a sacrificial lamb. And I'd probably have Stroheim just go with Joseph, with Avdol, Iggy, and Polnareff. So Avdol would still die, but Stroheim, since he's probably got UV lights built into him, he would basically just flash Vanilla Ice, once he's revealed to be a vampire at least, or maybe even before. So in other words, Vanilla Ice would die even quicker, Polnareff's injuries probably wouldn't be that bad, and Iggy also wouldn't die, most importantly. So that would more or less just make the story better, and a lot of the story more or less goes the same, so the Crusaders would still more or less split up, in my honest opinion, and I get the feeling that Polnareff would still run off, and Jotaro would probably go after him with Iggy, and I feel like, as for the next split up, I think Kakyoin, Dominic, and Nico can just go together, and Joseph and Stroheim would work together. As for how I think this would go, I think that Stroheim would reveal the world's power by being Donut, but he would survive the attack, as Stroheim's German science probably, those hacks are just able to prevent that from happening. So I assume he would actually survive the attack. So I feel like Stroheim would just get taken out of the fight and get injured, so kind of in Kakyoin's place, in my honest opinion, as I think that it'd make more sense to have Joseph and Stroheim travel together. And I feel like Joseph still dies, like how he does in the OG timeline. And I would probably just go with Jotaro versus Dio, like it was in the canon. The only real change is that I would include more characters to help Polnareff, like Kakyoin, and Dominic, and Nico, and Iggy, who are all there to help. So those characters would probably just be able to help Jotaro out, and I would have Stroheim actually make a return later on to reveal that he didn't die from the attack, and fights Dio on his own. So I'd say Jotaro gets knocked down a little bit, so Stroheim can get his own moment to fight Dio. After that, I would have Dio actually fully kill Stroheim there, crush him to death, find a way to kill him, but Dio would end up being the one to kill Stroheim in this timeline. So the rest of the part goes the same. Jotaro eventually catches up with Dio again, and that leads to the ending with Jotaro versus Dio. Only change is that Stroheim and Abdul would be the only deaths. Abdul and Stroheim are the only deaths. Kakyoin, Iggy, and Dominic and Nico all get to live, and Jotaro, Joseph, and Polnareff are also still alive, like in canon. So the next part to change would be part 4, Diamonds Unbreakable. So now, as for this timeline, I'd say the only real changes being that Kakyoin and Nico would be here alongside Joseph and Jotaro. Kakyoin would go with Jotaro, while Nico would be with Joseph. As for changes, I don't think too much would change, except Kakyoin would just help Jotaro out during the events of Morio. Nico would more or less just be around to keep an eye on Joseph while he's still at his senile state and basically not being as good as he used to be. As for Part 4's big changes, I do believe Nico can maybe help out in the Kira investigation, but mostly she's just with Joseph. I think she'd probably do more than Joseph did, to be fair. And I think Kakyoin would do more than Joseph and would probably play a similar role to someone like Jotaro. I feel like a lot of Diamonds Unbreakable more or less would just go the same, with the exception of just having more characters around. So, in my opinion, Part 4 more or less just goes the same. So, the next part is Part 5, which I feel like would just more or less go the same. Like the start off from all the way up until the ending half. So, like, most of the part until the final fight is when we see changes. Unless you want to go with the assumption that either Jotaro sends Kakyoin or Nico to Italy, which I don't personally see. Maybe Nico can go, but like, I highly doubt Kakyoin. I mean, I could see Kakyoin. Nico, maybe, it's hard to say. And unlike Rose and Kakyoin, I don't see these two ending up, so I personally think they'd probably find their own love. But I could see Kakyoin and Nico actually having kids around this time, so yeah. But they would probably just not get involved with the Part 5 stuff, as they'd probably just have their own families. But Dominic and Iggy are with Polnareff. And don't worry, Dominic will probably still have his child, and I could see Polnareff also having his child who appear in this timeline, assuming that all the other Crusaders having kids motivate Polnareff, but that's going to be a Part 6 discussion. This is currently Part 5. Now, as for change-wise, this one is very tough to say because now you have additional characters in the part. So, most of the part at this point, we have the same cast as we do in the canon. We have Giorno, Mista, Narazia, Trish, Bruno. And you also have the two additional characters, plus Diavolo and Polnareff still. So, now the Chariot Requiem body switch stuff. In my opinion, I think someone's gonna die here between Polnareff and Dominic. I think one of them's gonna maybe die while the other one gets stuck inside Coco Jumbo. As for the rest of the part, Abakio still dies since his death happened before the final fight, so he's a dead man no matter what. And I feel like, and I also think Bruno would still die since his first death happened before anyone can prevent that, and the second death kind of needed to happen because if he wasn't gonna die there, then he would have just died a couple days later. No way to stop that from happening. As for Narazia, though, I personally think Iggy would die and save him. Now, you could theoretically have Narazia be the one who dies like he does in canon because of him being fated to die, but in a series like JoJo, I don't really buy that. If anything, I could personally just see Narazia maybe living in this timeline. Since, in a way, aren't all the parts technically fated? Like, in particular, 4 and 6 were also pretty much heavily like they had a lot of fate themes in it and were predetermined as well. And plus, a lot of the deaths were predetermined only to be prevented. Like in Part 4, Josuke and the crew were all fated to die to bite the dust. And in Part 6, Emporia was like fated to die to Pucci. So like, in my honest opinion, I personally get the feeling that Narantia's death could technically be prevented. Maybe Iggy could just use a sand clone and then just get killed later on, saving him. In my opinion, I think Narantia would live. But between Polnareff and Dominic, I don't see one of them becoming a human at the end. I personally get the feeling that one of them is going to end up dying before the Requiem stuff, while the other one ends up getting stuck in the Requiem. Iggy could switch bodies with a cat for more or less humorous reasons, kind of like the whole thing with Trish and Mista switching bodies, more or less there for jokes. And there's really nothing else I could really see changing, except the final battle, which would be where all the big changes come in. I don't think there'd be as many changes as part 4, because I think 4 would probably have a few more, but 5 has a small bit of change. That only happens at the ending. Now we go to Stone Ocean, Part 6. And this is kind of like the Mario What If, but all the OCs are coming in, kind of like in the Mario What If. So Kakyoin still has Tinmei, but without Rose. Kind of like in some of my Kakyoin Lives videos where Caesar still dies. Kakyoin's still able to have Tinmei, because I don't think he would. I think he'd have a family still. Polnareff could have John Perry, since I feel like Dominic would still have Sophia. But Tidejin, I can't pronounce the name. I don't know why I picked a hard name. I wanted to fit the theme of Stone Ocean, of fashion stuff. Her, she wouldn't exist because you need Julius's DNA. So by that logic, Nico would probably still have a child, in my opinion. I think she'd marry and have kids, but I feel like it would probably just be with a random dude. So, and honestly, at this point, it just depends. She could have a son, she can have a daughter. It's hard to say. But Tinmei, John Perry, Michael Polnareff, and Sophia, like those 3, they still exist. Nico's child, it honestly depends on fate. It honestly depends on their stand. It can maybe affect the part. Josuke would still get involved. Same with Okuyasu. Maybe Koichi and Rohan. Depends on you. And, well, the final fight of Part 6 would be pretty interesting to watch. As for how I think it could change, I feel like Hermes would probably just die in FF's place. Weather Report would still die. I think Raquel gets to turn good. FF would die. I think Raquel maybe dies. Like, FF maybe dies to Sea Moon. Raquel can maybe die in the final fight. Okuyasu would probably die. At least someone from the Mori Warriors. Either Okuyasu or Rohan I'm leaning more towards. I don't really see Koichi or Josuke dying. Or maybe Josuke. But I'm doubtful of him dying. And I personally get the assumption that someone's definitely going to have to die. Like, a big character's going to have to die at the end just to stop the universe resetting. Maybe it's Josuke. Maybe it can be Kakyoin. Maybe it's Jotaro. It's going to be someone who does it. But if I'm predicting who's going to live, I'd probably have Jolene be a survivor. I'd probably just have all the Crusaders' children survive, as I really can't see any of them dying. I do believe that I do see Emporio also living, because at that point, he's basically just bulletproof, so he's gonna survive no matter what. And I see Anasui surviving, and I probably get the assumption that at least one of the other Stone Ocean Jobros could maybe live. I just think Anasui is the most likely odds of living. I can't really see who else lives, to be fair. The rest of the characters, like Koichi, I feel like he's gonna survive, so I'm gonna go with the assumption and I'm gonna say that those 7 are gonna live. So Jolene, Tinmei, Sophia, John, Nico's child, Emporio, Anasui, and Koichi. Those 8, I meant. Sorry. Those 8 are guaranteed survivors. Guaranteed deaths are Hermes and Weather Reports. And probably FF, Raquel, and Okuyasu are most likely gonna die. Rohan is also in a maybe most likely, but he's in a 50-50 as well. I'd say at that point, Rohan could live, but he could die. And then between one of the Crusaders or Josuke, I think someone's gonna have to take a big sacrifice at the end and die. So that's more or less my guess. I do think one of the Crusaders will die, and that's only left between like Jotaro, Kakyoin, and Nico. Maybe Dominic or Polnareff, assuming you want one of them to make it out of the part alive as a human. But that's kind of it for part 6. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I especially hope that you also enjoyed the video. The guy I requested the video to, I can't think of your head. It's on the top of my head. What's your name again? Pesky Side. Yeah, Pesky Side. Yeah, sorry. Forgot your name for a minute. But, hope you enjoyed the video. Sorry if the beginning half was a little uncomfortable because this was a very interesting video and was going to be a very hard one to make because we know how today's society is. If you talk positive about something like this, hey, Kanye West said he was, so like maybe it's a free pass. But okay. Jokes aside, thanks for watching, everyone who's seen the video. I'm gonna see y'all next time for a hopefully less controversial video.